In 1937, the most powerful art expert in the world announced a discovery, a lost masterpiece by Johannes Vermeer, the quiet genius of Delft. He called it Every Inch of Vermeer. He was staring at a fake. It had been painted, months earlier, by a bitter, middle-aged Dutchman the critics had written off as talentless. His name was Han van Meegeren, and he was about to pull off one of the greatest art frauds in history. A con that would fool the experts, enrich the Nazis, and end with him on trial for his life. So was he a common criminal or the most gifted painter of his century? To understand the con, you have to understand the wound. Han van Meegeren could paint. Technically, he was brilliant, precise, patient, a master of old techniques. But the art world of the 1920s wanted originality, modern feeling, the new. And when critics looked at his work, they saw only imitation. One review has haunted his story ever since. A gifted technician, it said, with every virtue except originality. It broke something in him. If the experts thought he was just a copyist, he would prove exactly how good a copyist could be. Good enough to humiliate every one of them. The problem is that forging an old master is almost impossible to do convincingly. Paint takes 3 centuries to fully harden. Old canvases crack in a particular way, and any chemist could expose a fresh painting in an afternoon. So, Van Meegeren became a scientist of deception. He bought genuine 17th century paintings, worthless ones, and carefully scrubbed the images away, keeping the ancient linen and its web of fine cracks. He ground his own pigments the way Vermeer had, real lapis lazuli, lead white. He used badger hairbrushes. And then came his secret weapon. Instead of oil, he mixed his paint with an early plastic, a phenol resin, the stuff of Bakelite. He baked each canvas in an oven until the paint turned hard and brittle, like paint that had aged for 300 years. Then he rolled the canvas to crack the surface and rubbed black ink into the cracks to fake centuries of grime. The result could survive the tests. It looked old because, chemically, it now behaved old. But a perfect fake needs more than chemistry. It needs a story the experts already want to believe. And here Van Meegeren did something genuinely brilliant. The leading Vermeer authority of the age was a man named Abraham Bredius, nicknamed the Pope of Art Connoisseurs. Bredius had a pet theory that somewhere out there was a lost early Vermeer, a religious painting influenced by the Italian master Caravaggio. No such painting had ever been found. So Van Meegeren painted it. He did not copy an existing Vermeer. He invented the exact missing masterpiece the experts were dreaming of and called it The Supper at Emmaus. In 1937, he let it surface, and the old man took the bait completely. Bredius declared it Vermeer's finest work, every inch of Vermeer. The painting was bought for the nation for around 520,000 guilders, a fortune, and hung as a national treasure in a Rotterdam museum. Crowds came to admire a fake. Van Meegeren had beaten the greatest expert alive using the expert's own wishful thinking against him. And once he knew it worked, he could not stop. Over the next few years, he produced more religious Vermeers, selling them for staggering sums. By some estimates, his forgeries earned him the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars today. Then history complicated everything. The Germans occupied the Netherlands, and one of Van Meegeren's fakes, a painting called Christ with the Adulteress, found its way, through a Nazi-linked dealer, into the personal collection of Hermann Göring, the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany. Göring paid a reported 1.5 million guilders for it. He believed he owned a genuine Vermeer, one of the rarest treasures on Earth. He had, in fact, been handed a fresh fake by a Dutchman working in secret. When the war ended, that single sale became a noose. Allied officers found Göring's looted art hoard hidden in an Austrian salt mine, and among it was the Vermeer. Investigators traced the paper trail backward from Göring to the dealer to a single name. On the 29th of May 1945, Han van Meegeren was arrested. The charge was collaboration. He had sold a piece of Dutch heritage to the enemy. In the fury of liberation, that was treason. And treason carried the death penalty. So van Meegeren faced an impossible choice. Stay silent and hang as a traitor, or confess to being a forger and face prison as a fraud. He chose the truth nobody believed. The painting in Göring's hands, he said, is not a Vermeer. It is a Van Meegeren. I painted it myself. The authorities were skeptical. How do you prove you painted a Vermeer? There was only one way. Under guard, watched by reporters and court witnesses, van Meegeren set up a canvas and over several months in 1945 painted one more Vermeer from scratch. A new religious scene in the old master's style, entirely by his own hand. Meanwhile, a scientific team led by the conservator Paul Cormans put the paintings under the microscope. And there it was. The phenol resin. A plastic that did not exist in Vermeer's century. The proof was chemical, and it was absolute. The treason case collapsed. If the painting was a fake, it had never been a national treasure, and selling it to Göring was not treason. It was a swindle. When the trial finally opened in October 1947, the charge was only forgery and fraud. He was convicted and sentenced to a single year. And here the story turns strange. To much of the exhausted Dutch public, van Meegeren was no longer a criminal. He was the little man who had tricked the mighty, who had sold Hermann Göring a worthless fake and taken his money. One 1947 poll, cited by his biographer Jonathan Lopez, ranked him among the most popular people in the entire country. The forger had become a folk hero. But that legend deserves a hard look, and Lopez gives it one. Digging through the archives, he argues van Meegeren was no anti-fascist trickster. He admired Hitler, funded Nazi causes, and had been forging for money since the 1920s, long before any noble revenge. The image of the patriot who fooled the Nazis may be the last and best forgery he ever sold. He never served his sentence. 6 weeks after his conviction, at the end of December 1947, his heart gave out and he died. What he left behind is a question that has only grown sharper with time. He did not just fool the experts. He gave them exactly what they wanted to see, and they called it genius. So how much of what we admire is in the painting, and how much is in the story we tell ourselves about it? Today, we like to think science has closed that door. That a lab or an algorithm could never be fooled the way Bredius was. Maybe. But the newest tools still argue over what is real, and a man with an oven and a jar of resin once beat the best eyes in the world. So tell me in the comments, was Han van Meegeren a criminal or an artist who beat the system at its own game? If you want another story of a masterpiece that was not what it seemed, watch our video on the Salvator Mundi next. And if you like the stories the history books get slightly wrong, subscribe. We do this every day. Until next time,